Hello. Hi,
All right.
everyone. Welcome to today's session on the gender inclusion for financial solution, gender inclusive financial solutions. I'm really excited to be here as part of Financial Inclusion Week. And so today we'll just dive into how human-centered design can be used to bridge the gap between financial services and the people that the services aim to serve. And we'll specifically look at the unique challenges faced by garment workers in Vietnam, especially women, and we'll discuss how we develop some of these solutions to address financial exclusion by taking a gender lens. So throughout this hour, we'll share our approach to gender inclusive design and we'll introduce a framework that we use and some insights that came up from the work that we did to tell the story of how idea.org and Doodle Design worked with different factory workers and local partners to create the solutions that were financially empowering. So we'll have some interactive elements at some point, and we'll ask you a couple of questions. So feel free, and we encourage you to share your thoughts and share your experiences with us in the chat. So I hope you're ready to participate. But before we get into everything, all the things I've mentioned right now, I can start with an introduction. So I'm Agnes. I'm a business designer at idea.org. And what that basically means is I work at the intersection of business and design. And so my role is typically all about making sure that whatever we develop and whatever teams are coming up with is not only innovative, but it's also feasible, it's financially sustainable, and makes sound business sense. And at idea.org, I've gotten to work on a couple of really interesting gender projects. There was one on a gender innovation toolkit with UN Women, and there was another around building blocks for gender equality with the Chroma Collective. And so through these projects and through workshops and other webinars, I've been able to share these tools both internally with our team and also externally with our clients and our partners. And so today I'm really excited to share these insights, what I've learned so far, and to share how we can design gender inclusive financial solutions. So that's about me. I work at idea.org, as I mentioned. Idea.org is a nonprofit design firm which is focused exclusively on social impact. And we really believe in the power of design to address some of the world's most pressing challenges. And we approach our work with commitment to really centering the voices of those impacted by these issues. And in the past 15 years, we have partnered with organizations in over 45 countries to launch impactful solutions reaching more than 64 million people. So that's ig.org. I will pass it on to Chris to introduce himself and to introduce Doodle Design.
Thank you, Agnes. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Elkin, originally from Northern Ireland, but had the pleasure of living in Southeast Asia for 25 years, most of my adult life, and the last 19 in Vietnam. Always in a design, in the design research, making, doing field. Maybe we just flip to the next slide. I'll give you a little context to that. And had the pleasure over the last 5 years of founding and running Doodle Design. And a key part of that is basically facilitating and equipping people with the power of design thinking. We're going to share more about that, but ultimately ensuring we're achieving some great outcomes for their time invested. And Aggie, if we could go to the next slide, please. And the reason we do this is we'll be sharing with you and what made such great chemistry between Agnes and I and IDEO and the Doodle team was because we really look to put people at the heart of what we do, and we look to actively engage different stakeholders and the people they're seeking to serve, ultimately to really deeply understand the priority problems to solve for those people and to come up with the right fit solutions. And we're really looking forward to sharing more about that in relation to these garment factory workers. Agnes. So, folks, building on that, some of you may have used human-centered design before, or sometimes we call it design thinking. Some of you may be using it without even realizing you're using it. But we believe very strongly that design should be enjoyed by everyone. And you're going to be seeing how we actively involve communities real people, the organizations involved, and observing and engaging them in ways that helps them share with us what great looks like, so we are helping them find the right fit solutions ultimately. Next slide. So to add a little bit more to that, human-centered design really is so simple, but so powerful. It is a framework which we'll share a little bit more about shortly, that really helps uncover and identify these deeply held human truths, the barriers, the strengths, the needs, these potential directions, these sometimes what we call unmet needs that aren't immediately obvious for people, until we engage them through human-centered design to reveal what really matters for them. More on that shortly. So to add to that, you can see here a very top-line way to visualize what we've been working through on this Bright Futures program. These sort of circular, iterative ways of working, where we keep a very open mind, even in how we define the initial problem statement in this program, to gaining inspiration, to what we say, sort of identifying what those priority areas of challenge or opportunity were to address, and then very quickly finding ways to share back solutions in order to get feedback as quickly as possible on these early stage ideas. We call them sacrificial concepts. We'll be sharing more about that shortly. And then ultimately testing and really actively co-creating ways forward with all stakeholders involved, in this case, hundreds of factory management and the end factory garment workers as well, to get to the right fit solutions, which we'll share with you shortly. Aggie. So if we sort of broke that down a little bit further, you're going to be seeing the ways that we've worked, find this sweet spot in between what's desirable from a human perspective, from all stakeholders involved, that therefore helps point us in directions for viable business and sustainable ways forward for the future, that can have long-term impact on all involved, and ways that actually are feasible in all kinds of limited environments and space and processes, ways of working, financial, technical, you name it, that we have to consider to make things feasible in the delivery as well. So it's these three vectors you're going to see that have helped us identify the most valuable and sustainable and impactful ways forward. Share more about that shortly.
Awesome.
So,
thanks, Chris. And so Chris has walked us through our process of human-centered design. However, we also really considered a gender lens in the work that we were doing. And so why is this even important? Why is this worth doing? So when we design without considering gender, it's really easy we risk reinforcing harmful stereotypes or maintaining the status quo. When we take a gender lens, we are able to unlock new insights and address hidden challenges and really create solutions that empower the people that we're trying to serve. We all have gender biases. We all have blind spots. I do. We all do. And without an awareness of these, it's really easy to unintentionally embed these biases and these blind spots into our solutions. And so a question I'd like us to consider, and we can also just drop our thoughts on this in the chat, is where has design reinforced harmful gender narratives, norms, and inequities? Edwin will drop this question in the chat for us right now. Feel free to share your thoughts on this in the chat and read the thoughts of others. However, I'd like to share one example where we have observed this. And this is this phenomenon on just like, if you're designing for women, let's make it pink, let's make it smaller, and then that should be enough. And there was this big pens really received lots of backlash. It was featured on the Ellen show. And it was really an example of people not really truly understanding what women need. And just based on certain assumptions, like all women like pink, and like women just need smaller things than men, and that's just enough. And that had its own problematic consequences. So I'm curious whether you have any examples in your just in your day-to-day life or even in your organization of solutions that you've tried to come up with, maybe with the right intention, but then without really thinking about the biases that you have, you are able you created something that really didn't end up serving the women you were trying to serve. Another question I would like to ask, or I'd like you to consider is, are there ways that design has transformed gender narratives, gender norms, and gender inequities? And so these are the more positive ones. Once again, please add your thoughts to this question in the chat. Would love to read what examples you have from the different contexts you work in, but also just from daily life. The example we have here to share is this Time Bank, which is a South African bank, and it has 50%, 51%, I think, women customers, and it's really growing its women customer base. And it's really due to Time's affordable transactional and savings accounts, and just really taking the time to understand what are the needs of women and how can we embed that in a financial product. And so this is a really inspiring example for me because it's both really geared towards women, but also profitable. And so in our work, we categorize gender consideration into these 4 levels. So we have gender negative, gender neutral, gender sensitive, and gender transformative. And the gender transformative solutions are the ones that aim to shift power dynamics. They aim to really address like the root causes of gender inequality, and they aim to challenge existing norms in the societies or in the communities that we're working in. And internally, we use this framework to help guide teams or to just guide us when we are building solutions. And when we are trying to, so we use this to evaluate whatever it is that we're building and to help find ways to just keep moving whatever we're building a lot closer to the right. And we map or we match our solutions against this continuum, and we try coming up with ideas and opportunities to really push them towards more transformative solutions. And so with that background on just like our approach to gender when we're working on different projects and our approach to design we're working on different projects, I just want to introduce this program that we worked on in Vietnam called Bright Futures. Our challenge was what's on the screen. How might we provide lasting economic resilience to factory workers in Vietnam? And so through human-centered design, we set out to understand the realities of garment workers and address the financial exclusion that garment workers in Vietnam often face. Our journey began actually before May, but like really when we were really starting and going out into the factories and going out to speak to people, that began in May of last year. We spent time with garment workers and with factory managers, and we listened to their stories. We tried to really understand their challenges, and we tested different solutions with them on the ground. And this collaborative and iterative process allowed us to really refine our ideas based on what we were hearing. And this all led to a pilot program. And we worked across various factories in Vietnam, all over the country, and each factory that we worked with brought unique challenges, but then also unique insights into our research. And maybe I'll pass it on to Chris to talk a little bit deeper about like where we went, how many people we spoke to, and what the research looked like.
Sure. Thanks, Agnes. Yeah, so very broad. Vietnam's population of well, gosh, somewhere between 90 and 100 million. It's grown double-digit percentage points just since I got here 19 years ago. Now, to get a good sense of what happens in Vietnam, we really needed to look from top to bottom. It's a long and narrow country, over 2,000 kilometers long. So it was important to get the nuances understood between the different regions. Primarily in Vietnam, that normally breaks down between North, Central, and South Vietnam. So the research we looked to break through was we had sort of that initial research, or for that initial sort of inspirational research where we did ethnographic research, interviewing, surveying, observing people. We worked with 8 factories throughout Vietnam, about 60 respondents. And then when we had that inspiration and begin to identify issues to address, which I'll touch on shortly with Agnes, we then took some of our early stage conceptual ideas, we call it live prototyping, and we actually tested those hypothesis ideas to see, are we really solving the right problems with the right solutions, with over 145 participants. We also have what we're going to share more about later, these peer leaders, these key people that sort of had a leadership role within the factories, that were the bridge between what we were trying to do in building financial literacy and inclusion with the factory workers themselves. So that was done over 3 factories, again, in South and North. And again, further data collection, feedback, responses with further 44 factories and 44 respondents and 3 factories. Thank you, Agnes. Next slide. So we had a summary here of what we call the financial realities of what we needed to consider, that led us then, with an understanding of these challenges, to different design opportunities, let's say. And something that runs throughout Asia, but is particularly prevalent, I think, in Vietnam, is that we're not talking to individuals. We are talking to families. These people always are part of a, let's say, a multi-generational family that they're considering. They're considering families, their own children, their own parents, perhaps older, when they are thinking about their financial situation. Now, within that, the reality is, of course, we are talking to people with a limited income, and this is often not so stable, let's just say, and this income level let's say, leads them to what you might call a scarcity mindset, where there's a very short-term viewpoint on what they believe, at least, is capable with them planning for the future. And within that, as I mentioned, that larger community perspective, there is a lot of spoken and unspoken social pressures that exist in all kinds of everyday life, some of which are planned for somewhat, some of which come completely out of the blue, whether that add financial burdens, whether this is untimely death or injury, or family members, extended family members that unfortunately, sadly, get involved in drugs and all sorts of illicit issues, or gambling, unfortunately, is a prevalent thing that came up a lot with these people. And this doesn't impact the individual, this impacts the whole family, the ecosystem around them. And within that, we're also still very much in the shadow of the post-COVID world, especially even last year. Things are changing already since we did this research, but COVID-19 had a big impact, obviously, globally. Vietnam is one of the most export-orientated countries in the region. So a large amount of its workforce, the garment workforce we're talking about, is impacted when things happen overseas. That includes the global economy and different geopolitical strife. And this has led to, again, not just the people we've talked to losing their jobs at times and having instability in income, but also having to take care of their wider social circle and family circle being impacted by downturns as well. The other factor, which is also very prevalent in Vietnam, more so than many countries, unfortunately, is the rise of the digital age. There has been a lot of scams and people losing money in all kinds of ways through digital fraud and what we call predatory lending. So again, this kind of short-term scarcity mindset, volatility in all these factors I've just mentioned, often leads people very vulnerable, really trying to make ends meet at a very short horizon line, and therefore more open to scams and these kind of things that are happening in social media. It's a hugely impacted or a high use case amongst this group for Facebook and TikTok in this country. And this means, people are able to reach them through mobile smartphones and the likes, and find all kinds of ways to scam them out of their money, unfortunately. So this means, it's with limited access to, even as we'll share in a moment, formal banking. It means workers are often even at higher risk of being exploited through, bad lending terms and scammers. Yeah, Agnes. So a few more perspectives, insights to add to that. We're going to share these between us, Agnes and I. What came out, what was quite interesting, is that given the heavy workload and the shortness of time that these workers often have, and the desire to be with their family and rest, frankly, one of the interesting insights that came out was that banking still, or formal banking, still felt very remote, very detached, and not part of their daily lives. And that was either the banks not really understanding them, even if they had the time to go into the bank branches, not feeling understood or cared for by the branch staff. And even we heard quite often being intimidated by the language, by what people were saying to them, by the sort of the tone, the attitude of being a low wage worker. So this had a cooling effect where they didn't feel considered by the formal banking sector, and therefore, unfortunately, led them into unwise decisions and in directions to go outside the formal banking system, and again fall into the prey of loan sharks and scammers and the likes. Agnes.
Yeah, another major insight that we learned is that in many Vietnamese households, women primarily manage financing and make day-to-day financial decisions. And so this role is really culturally reinforced. And I remember one worker saying a comment like, men are the ones who earn and women manage. And so there's this notion that men will make the money and then bring it home, and then women figure out what to do with that money. And so women really who held lots of like really significant influence over their family's financial well-being. However, they also face other unique challenges. They have limited career advancement opportunities, they have additional household responsibilities. And so, yes, while they played this really significant role and while they were really trusted, that was a really heavy burden on especially like the matriarchs of families, because they needed to do that. They needed to figure out their family's finances and sometimes extended family's finances while also thinking about the home, while also maybe trying to find other smaller ways of like making money. And so it really challenged us to think of ways that our program could both support and respect these roles in these families, while also addressing the stress that women may feel as the primary financial planners in their family. And we had lots more insights. And Edwin has shared in the chat a link to our white paper where you can read a lot more about the other insights that came up from this work. But for the purpose of this session, we just wanted to focus on those two, because those felt most relevant to this conversation. Over to you, Chris.
Sorry, just a bit of an issue there with my browser. Just to sort of then, from those findings, those insights, this then pointed us in directions that sort of shaped what we call the guiding principles for how we moved forward with our directions for potential solutions. And what we found amongst the dormant factors was the need to make this sort of financial learning light and engaging. So often these people, they learn family ways of doing things. They never really think or have had any formal learning in financial planning or self-management or family management. It's kind of happened informally. So we had to find ways to break down what to them was very complex financial concepts. And in doing so, we used humor, interactivity, this more sort of informal language that is less intimidating and much more accessible. I'll share more about that a little bit later. The other one was, I thought was extremely powerful and very simple, was leveraging peer learning for empowerment. This, you're going to see in some of the solutions, was where we created a safe space, a group environment that encouraged the garment factory leadership, the people that these people are managed with or work with closely, to share out their perspectives and life stories, so that the context of what was being shared with them was very powerfully and simply framed within their life sort of stage, persona, personality as such, and the kind of typical challenges that they face in their everyday life in Vietnam and at their factory. We'll share more about that later. So this then led us to sort of realizing the important thing about how we normalize financial conversations. And the interesting finding we had was, again, so much of what happens isn't really discussed. There's a considerable amount of taboo that seems to surround money and the management of money and the divvying up of money, the sharing of money, how money's used, the men having the money, the women having the money, and so on. And to open up those deeper conversations about financial health in ways that they've never really considered before, and therefore helping them to self-identify themselves, their needs, their own goals more clearly, and to then shape the training around that. And again, emphasizing that point, as we've shared before, prioritizing family-centric financial goals, right? Recognizing that really for every group that we're going to share with you more about in due course, financial decisions must be made with the family well-beings in mind. No solutions should support, those solutions must align and support those collective family-oriented goals. That's a really big point not to miss. Agnes. And Agnes, are you there? Just double checking. Can you hear
sorry.
us?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. And so with that in mind, with those guiding principles in mind, we went out and came up with a couple of concepts. I think we came up with 6 different ones. And we tested them, we looked at them through several lenses. The lenses Chris mentioned earlier of desirability and feasibility and viability, and also talked about impact. And so for everything that we came up with, we tried to assess it or evaluate it based on those different metrics. And so there are 4 concepts that we needed to, we dropped along the way because they didn't score high on all of those lenses. But I'd still like to tell you a little bit about the other things we came up with and some of the reasons why we dropped them. And so one of them was a semi-formal savings group. And this was to allow women who maybe, or like people who live close to each other, to pull money together and be able to lend to one another. I mean, similar to the chamas in Kenya, who are borrowing from that way of people saving money. And so these pooled resources or this pooled funds could help with emergencies or social events like weddings and funerals. However, while this was really popular, it wasn't really scalable if you think about the context of a factory. Considering, first of all, regulatory challenges, because it's like, why is a factory dealing with pulling money together? But then also considering the really high turnover rates in some of these factories, it just didn't make sense to have this thing where people are putting their money together and saving over time together. And then the other one was a digital financial literacy course. And so this one would start with a short onboarding quiz, and based on people's level or people's financial knowledge, then the content would be tailored to that. And at the end, they would earn certificates, and everyone would have a unique experience just based on their financial literacy and like, what their experience has been so far. And one of the reasons we dropped this is first, it had a really high upfront cost because it required a factory to have either laptops or tablets within the factories for factory workers to go in and use them and go through this digital financial literacy course. And then on top of that, we observed varied levels of digital literacy among factory workers. And so it just seemed like it would be really difficult to be able to do this considering this varied digital literacy levels. And then another one we came up with was a fair, or like a quarterly or annual fair. Considering we realized that financial service providers and factory workers are so distant, are so detached, this is an opportunity to bring them together in the same space, to start building trust amongst each other, and to also provide financial education, maybe some entertainment, some interactive elements. However, again, when thinking about feasibility, this one was really costly. It involved a lot of work to be done to really get the right partners on board. And we weren't very sure about the amount of, like the level of impact that this would actually have. And then the final one that we were really excited about, but we still had to drop, was a comedy show or a high kitsch. And this, we heard a lot about how we need to make financial education fun and interactive and relatable. And there were several examples we had from factory workers about other fun, either comedy shows or just like the use of theater, for example, to be able to teach. And so these performances would provide financial lessons in a really entertaining way. And it just seemed like a really fun thing for either factory workers or families to come and do together. So as excited as we were about it, we had to drop that one because first of all, it was also really costly to produce. But then there were concerns as well around whether these comedy shows or these shows in general would be able to capture nuances that were required to be able to really effectively teach about financial literacy and personal financial management. So as we went through the process of like building these to a certain level and just like testing them out a little bit, that process just helped us really refine our approach and really focus on building solutions that um, hit that sweet spot that Chris was talking about earlier. Just like this is both desirable, but also viable, but also feasible, and also has significant impact. And so what we ended up coming up with was the Bright Futures program. And it was made up of these peer groups, and each peer group would have a peer leader. The peer leader was not expected to be, let's say, a financial management expert. There was someone who volunteered to really just facilitate learning within their peer groups. And these peer leaders had a peer leader toolkit, and they would meet with someone from the program every so often. And this was now the support that we were giving this peer leader. And so the toolkit, for example, had lots of resources, conversation prompts. It had questions around, like, if someone asks a question like this is what you could potentially respond, and this is how you can support someone. It had suggestions on, like, these are the times you can meet, and these are the different ways you can meet, and these are the different ways you can come together in a group. And this was to help the peer leaders really perform their role as peer leaders effectively and with confidence. And then finally, every person who was part of this program received a guidebook. And this guidebook was divided into 5 chapters. There was one on understanding yourself. There was one on setting goals, setting financial goals for yourself and for your family. There was one on savings. There was one on loans, and there was a final one on social insurance. And so each peer group would decide how often they want to meet. But for example, if they were to meet every week, they would go through the content together Each chapter had a couple of questions and prompts and activities to do together. There were some prompts that you could take home to do with your family and questions you could ask your family at the end. And then the week after that, the group would review together and go through the next chapter. And to really personalize this process and to really personalize financial education, we came up with money personalities. And so these were archetypes just based on the different people that we spoke to. These were archetypes that represented the different ways people manage their money. So there was one who was anxious, there was one who was a little bit more casual, there was one who was really into saving and very risk averse, there was one who was very forward thinking. And so these different personalities or these different archetypes really helped the factory workers um, understand themselves a lot better and see themselves a lot better and have language to talk about some of the decisions and habits and financial habits that they have. And it was really interesting to see the different ways factory workers just like took these money personalities and made them their own. There were some who would say things like, right now where I am in my life, I'm a bin, but 2 years ago, I used to be a fang for whatever reason. Or I see myself as this personality and this other personality together. Or I think I'm this personality and I think my wife and my husband is this other personality. And now I understand a lot better about both the ways we maybe sometimes have conflicts when it comes to making decisions around money, but then also the ways sometimes you can really work well together. So each personality had strengths and weaknesses to really help people see the things that they can really leverage just based on their personality, but then also the things that they need to work on. And so the Bright Futures program followed these 5 stages. It started with discovery and ended with celebration at the end. And it started with peer leaders being onboarded, workers going through the program within their groups, and then ending with a really special graduation celebration where everybody who took part in the program was given a certificate and was really applauded for taking this step for their financial education, considering participating in the program was voluntary. And so the people had to only sign up if it's something that they were actually interested in. And this general structure really emphasized people learning together, people learning in community, and really encouraged workers to share whatever they were learning, even outside the factory. I mean, there were some groups with people who were about to retire and others who were in their first job. And so just some of these group dynamics really enabled so much cross sharing among people and people who in other circumstances we probably would not be interacting in the factory together. And so those are some of the things that factory workers at the end of the program ended up telling us that they really appreciated from the program. It was like, these are people that I see, but I never get to talk to, but now we're able to talk. And it's not just a surface level conversation. We have had some really in-depth conversations around money and why we make certain decisions with our money and what we want to do with the future and the future of our money and our families. And so this really strengthened some of the relationships that really in the factories. On the screen are some of the quotes that we heard from participants at the end of the program. And I especially want to just highlight that first one on knowing my money personality made me feel like I know myself better. And I think that was one, at least for me, was a big aha moment at the end of this work. I mean, it was just a reminder that money is so personal. I mean, financial education and like being able to learn how to manage your money is really not just about money. It's about your goals, it's about your future, it's about your personality, it's about the decisions that you make. And I think really starting with understanding yourself through these personalities really helped first like realizing the central personal money is, but then also start lowering the barrier and start making these conversations around money feel a little bit less taboo. And so while this project wasn't solely focused on designing for women, I mean, it was really important for us to design for all the factory workers, and factories have both men and women. However, we recognize that gender plays a really significant role in how people learn about money, what people learn about money, how they make financial decisions, how they perceive the different financial solutions available to them, which financial solutions are accessible to them and which ones are not. And so, because of this, we really made sure we considered gender at every stage of our work. So, from research planning, we made sure that we engaged both men and women at different levels in the factories, just to make sure that we were hearing from our diverse group and we were getting diverse perspectives, and we were hearing, we were understanding different behaviors among the different genders in the factories. And then we had several research objectives, but then one major research objective of ours was to understand how gender influences people's experiences and their decision making and their perceptions of money. And so this objective really helped us understand the unique challenges and opportunities that different genders face. And it just made sure that gender was always top of mind, even if, for example, from the perspective of the factory workers, this was not like a women's project or a men's project or anything like that. But then we were really thoughtful about making sure whatever it is we built took into consideration the challenges that the different genders face. And then also when we were building when we were coming up with our solutions, I mean, I mentioned earlier one of the quotes we had about, men earn and women manage. And so we really wanted to create solutions that um, allowed everybody to learn about finances and everyone to have this financial knowledge. And it was really important for us to, yes, meet people where they are. So some people maybe have no experience managing money, while others, based on maybe their gender, they've had to have lots of experience managing money. But then there's this other thing that they don't have. So it was really important for us to meet people where they are, but then also respect the different cultural values and principles that they have within their communities, while also making sure that whatever it is that we're building was really inclusive. And then another way that we really made sure we considered gender was when we were selecting peer leaders. It was really important for us to make sure we had gender balance among the different peer leaders and to make sure that both men and women were represented. And so this encouraged a really broad range of experiences in the different group discussions, and it strengthened the overall learning experience. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Agnes. Yeah, so I think in reflection, in terms of where the program is now, we need to see this as I think the first step. Clearly, what we've identified, inspired, and identified, defined, and validated is that there's a significant need for financial inclusion amongst these garment workers, as we've shared. The good news is it's been inspired and researched and validated to show it's working with thousands of people in particularly the north of Vietnam and also in and around Ho Chi Minh City in the south. So what we're looking for, and maybe there's people in the room that can help on this as well, is we are looking to continue to engage the partners behind this, Primark and Standard Chartered, and we are looking to reach out to potential training partners who can look to leverage all this knowledge and tools of Bright Futures to go and take it further beyond the main factories we've been co-creating and testing and bringing it to life with so far. So that's where we are right now. Thousands of people impacted, but of course, clearly many more thousands of people that we would love it to reach. We don't want this work to go to waste. And clearly, obviously, we feel there would be other people beyond Vietnam in the region, who knows where, that would also benefit a lot. We feel there's a lot of transferable learnings, perspectives, and potential solutions that could scale elsewhere too. We'll come back to that a little bit more. Agnes.
Awesome. And so to finish, I just want to leave us with some of these reflections. These were some of the questions we were holding, and we'd like to share some of these questions with you. And the first one is, how can we make sure that the voices of the people that we are designing for are not only heard, but also really actively shape the solutions that we develop. In the work that you're doing, are there ways to really bring whoever it is you're designing for a lot closer to the solution and to the decision making of what that solution looks like? Another one is, what are the ways that whatever work we're doing can really start identifying and counteract the gender stereotypes and biases that could unintentionally be embedded in whatever it is we're designing? Are there ways to really push this a little bit further so that whatever it is we're building is more inclusive and a little bit more empowering and doesn't have some of these unintended consequences based on some unintentional biases that are embedded in the designs of the solutions? And finally, how can we make sure that whatever we are building doesn't just address immediate needs, but instead starts working to challenge and transform underlying structures and norms that really perpetuate gender inequality? And these are now the solutions that are towards gender transformative. I know sometimes when we go out into the field and when we're carrying out research, we're able to see very clearly the immediate needs that people have, and we try to, and that's important, and it's important to address those. But how can we push the needle a little bit further and not just address those immediate needs, but think about challenging and transforming some of these structures and norms? And as we're thinking about designing for financial inclusion, a question I'd like to leave you with is, what are the ways that we can really simplify financial education so that it's both accessible and engaging for the people that are learning, but then it also is understood and it's effective and it's actually retained over time? That sometimes can be our interesting balance, but I think it's possible. Um, Making the content really accessible, really engaging, but then also effective enough for it to be understood and retained over time. And then, what are the different ways that we can really start demonstrating the long-term economic benefits of supporting underserved sectors? I mean, you mentioned earlier how sometimes financial service providers see the people we're designing for example, like these garment workers, as not the most profitable for us to design for. So what are the ways that we can start demonstrating what these benefits could look like and start encouraging policymakers, for example, to prioritize these groups? And finally, how can we design really sustainable financial products and financial services that, yes, cater to the communities we're designing for, but then are also able to ensure value for the financial institutions? And that just means that because they're sustainable, they are affordable and they're accessible to these users, but then also they provide value to the financial institutions who are trying to serve them. And so with that, I will pause. I know Chris and I have been talking for a while, and I'd like to open the session up to any questions. Maybe I will now start seeing in the chat whether there are any questions that we need to address. Edwin, is there any question in the chat for us? I see people want the guidebooks, so yes, Edwin will happily share them with you. I see someone talked about how some unexpected consequences is increase in unpaid care work for women. That's true. Actually, the hardest part is this admin stuff. You as a wife should master this headache skill. Remember all bills and expected payments. Well, if shortage happens, wife might be the person to blame. Totally agreed. Okay. The value of unpaid care and domestic work. So this is George. Hi, George. The value of unpaid care and domestic work to be as much as 9% of global GDP. That's wild. Women's contribution at around 6.6% of GDP compared to men's. That is very insane. I see many people are surprised to hear that as well. I'm curious about the answer on the question you mentioned. How might we address with design, not just immediate problems, but also underlying structural issues? I mean, it's a question that we are also holding. And what I'd say is, I mean, many times we're thinking about our solutions. We build them, we go out into the field, maybe we carry out this research, and we think about how it can serve whatever problem or whatever need that we have identified right now. However, whenever we're thinking about the long term, whenever we're thinking long term, I think that the question is like, what can we keep building to this to be able to make it actually transformative? I mean, a lot of when thinking about challenging gender norms and some of these structures that have been in existence for a really long time, that takes a long time, and that takes a lot of effort, and that takes a collaboration of different stakeholders. And so, I think just having a long game, building whatever it is that you want to build right now, and thinking about the different ways that you can keep building on whatever it is that you have right now to reach some of those transformative goals, I think is what I'd suggest. But we're also all just trying to figure out that question. So thanks, Crystal, for that question. I think this one on how do we address social norms that put women at a lower level is quite similar. What should inform a gender policy for my institution? And this is from Abdullah. Interesting question, which I feel is out of my scope to answer, just because I feel like that's a really broad question. And what I'd suggest is having like a really focused gender expert for in your organization to really help you think about the gender policy for your organization and your institution. So sorry, I'm not able to give you a better answer to that question.
My only other comment to add to that, Aggie, would be to look, Abdullah, at the steps, at the process that we shared with you, with what's worked for addressing similar issues with garment factory workers in Vietnam. The interesting thing about the human-centered design approach, right, is that it's a way of working that you can apply to any challenge. So what I would say to you is look to identify the stakeholders that you feel in your institution have a role, have an influence, have an interest in solving your challenge, right? Try to find ways to go and observe and research and interview those stakeholders about what keeps them up at night. Go and with them co-create potential solutions that might help shape your policy. The answers normally all lie within the people that are in your organization and who you're ultimately trying to solve them with and for. So how do you, again, using similar steps we've shared with you, research, making, testing techniques, it's all possible to reuse what we shared with you and shape it for your own institutions, challenges, whatever they might be. Yeah, so sorry, we can't really get into the greater detail than that, but I hope that gives some context. And again, download the white paper, look at the process in more detail, and that may give you some sense of directions to take. Sorry,
thanks for that, Chris.
Agnes.
No, yeah, no, that was helpful. Thank you, Chris. There's a question here that says, I quite like the fact that you pointed out that money talk is not transparent, yet among these workers or in their family. Can you elaborate on this fact? Which factors lead you to this insight? Can you share some of the stories around this? Sure. So, I mean, it was an interesting tension because first, money is a familial resource. So people, for example, if someone earns money, they give it to their mom, and let's say several siblings, they all give their money to their mom, and the money makes decisions, and the mom makes decisions on how that money is going to be spent in the family. And so in those ways, people were having maybe surface conversations about money, where it's just like, here's my money, or this is going to be my contribution. However, there were very many stories we had where it's like, I just contribute this, but I don't tell my mom what I earn, or I give my mom this money, but we don't have a conversation around how this money is spent. So I don't really have a say in how this money is spent. Or there's this one person in the family who learns a little bit about finances, but then because talking about having like deeper conversations about money, it feels a little bit icky. They just keep that knowledge to themselves, and all they do is, if someone needs money, I will send it. If I need to contribute to my family's money, and like pool of money, then I will contribute it. And so what we were trying to encourage is conversations that just go beyond, this is how much I'm going to contribute. Conversations that start opening up maybe communal or like familial decision making. So for example, if we're all bringing our money together, maybe we should all have a say in how we use it and where it's saved, in where we potentially invest it. And those are the things what we were trying to encourage. There were very few conversations around why people were making certain decisions around money. And so that was something else we wanted to encourage. And so, yeah, those are some of the stories that we had. We definitely had stories of, for example, um, someone gives their money to their mom to save on their behalf, but they have no idea where it's being saved. And they don't keep track of like how much I'm giving her, and so how much it should be, and wherever it's being saved, is this the right place? Am I getting really good interest here? Is it really risky? And so just opening up those conversations a little bit more was what we wanted to encourage. Let me see.
Just,
Oh, so yeah, please go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
just to add to that, yeah, the conversations were really key. It also helped, as you'll see in the program guide that we'll share the link to later. So much is not only just equipping the factory workers with the knowledge of what they need to consider to plan and manage money, but it's also giving them the questions to ask themselves, right? About self-identification of who am I? What are my problems? What resonates with me? So questions being defined that they can ask themselves. And then, as Agnes has said, to ask family members in, I guess, diplomatic ways sometimes, right? To have that knowledge and to have those questions, which they have in the booklets that we've given them, and the knowledge and the templates, and also the ability, as you'll see, to write down their thoughts, to journal, to gather their thoughts, to gather the questions, to gather the feedback they get from that family. That really helped. My understanding is that really helped them feel empowered and have agency to then take steps to ensure how their money was actually properly, or better managed and used, to avoid all the debt traps or whatever it might be that might be continuing in their family if they didn't have this knowledge. Sorry, without getting into too much detail, the other thing here is so much depends on the financial literacy of the wider family or the parents of these people, if they're relatively young workers, right? So it's quite different for a worker that has a parent that's gambling or no financial literacy or is inheriting bad financial behavior, let's say, from generations, versus those that may have family that are relatively debt-free, right? So that's a big challenge, is how do we equip them with the right questions for themselves and to have better conversations with their family to break those kinds of cycles. Just add that on. Thanks, Agnes.
Awesome. I know we are almost at time, so I will we'll just answer one more question. Chris, I think this would be a good one for you to answer. And it's this one on, I am from CARE in Vietnam, not working directly with government workers, but more in financial inclusion. We do apply HCD in our work, but often face challenges in really getting out a solution or concrete deliverable. Collective voice does have some side effects. Do you have any advice on future running HCD sessions that we could lean on to more tangible or clear-cut outcomes?
Yeah, sure. Hello, Care Vietnam. I know some of you. It's lovely to have you in the room. So again, I think that human-centered approach of creation. We say we keep a very open mind as to what the solution might be, and we try to avoid our institutional bias, um, and let the future user of whatever those financial solutions might be the compass. We let them in, as I believe we've done with Bright Futures, to rapidly take whatever solutions, might not be one solution, but a broad range of possible solutions that might work. And we look to put those in front of the people to see how they use it, to see how they understand it, to see how does this really genuinely solve those more complex uh, unmet needs that you have, and there needs to be ways, again, through human-centered design, that you don't only ask people what they think, but you observe and look to understand what they understand and how they use your solutions to then iterate, refine, tweak, kill some ideas at an early stage at low cost, and to only move forward with those solutions where you clearly see inspiration, validation from the end user, that it's relevant, that it's engaging them in the right way, that it's desirable, and that they're recommending it. And you can measure all of those things to ensure ultimately a tangible, right fit solution for basically co-created, designed by those people, not someone else sitting in another institution second guessing for them, but by and with those people. So again, there's all kinds of tools in the human-centered design toolkit we can leverage to do that. Yeah, I see a
Awesome.
few. Aggie,
Yeah,
anything you wanted to add to that?
no, mostly because we're at time, and I know the next session is probably beginning right now or in the next few minutes. So thank you so much for joining. This has been such an engaging chat. So really excited about the work that we continue doing in this space, and really grateful to all of you for joining and for engaging with us today. So have a nice day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Financial Inclusion.